Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session of authentic and unapologetic conversations. I'm trying to show my shirt because I'm actually wearing the shirt. Authentic, unapologetic conversations. Really is excited. It just came in yesterday, so I was like, right on time for today's session. So I am so excited to bring to you all today's conversation. I don't even know what to do with myself because today's guest is very special. I want to make sure that when we brought this topic for this month, Hispanic Heritage Month, that we brought a topic that would be really impactful and would help people with some insights and actions that would be something really, really great for them to take away. So I could not think of anybody better when I started thinking about the topic, which is financial literacy. When I started thinking about this topic, I was like, I went through a list and was like, I don't know why I'm going through a list. I live with probably the best person to have this conversation with. So I would love to introduce our guest for today, Enrique Torres, and get into a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. Before we do that, again, I'm Latrice Torres. I'm the CEO and principal consultant of LeaderKeys Consulting. We are a small but very powerful group of consultants that help individuals with career strategy. We help leaders with team management. We help organizations with leadership program development, which can encompass things from workshops, facilitation, keynote speaking, and even master classes. So that's a little bit about us. Let's talk about Enrique. I was so excited. I was almost like just skipped everything and just did that. All right, so let's talk about Enrique. Our guest today is Enrique Torres. He is a CFA and CIA. CAIA, make sure I get that correct. And let me give you his bio really quickly. So Enrique Torres is a seasoned leader in financial operation. He brings deep expertise from roles at places like IFS or International Fund Services, Anchorage Capital Group, Fortress, RegentAtlantic, KKR Financial Services, and he's currently at Yieldstreet. He is an alumnus of Babson College, which is the #2 best ranked college in the U.S. by Wall Street Journal and the #1 school for entrepreneurship. It is a powerhouse. His ability to infuse operational excellence and project management mindset into a financial services organization has helped them create sustainable competitive advantages. With all of that said, Enrique is also my husband. He's my life partner. He's occasionally my better half and my best friend. And I can't thank him enough. I want to thank him now before we even get started for really sitting down with me today. Y'all are really in for some insights, authenticity, unapologetic, because this is the type of sessions that we do. As always, get your notebooks or blank documents together, ready. Get it together now, because you are going to get so much information. You're not going to want to miss a single thing. So with that said, I'm going to bring Enrique up to the stage. Welcome, Enrique.
Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. As you can tell, I'm excited. I can't even talk because I'm so excited to have you and to share you with everyone. We're going to dive right into it. We're talking about financial literacy. This is Hispanic Heritage Month. What I didn't say in his bio is Enrique is Mexican. You couldn't tell by the name. And like I said, I thought he would be really the best person to bring some insight into this topic. So before we even get into it, Enrique, tell us, why is this topic important to you?
Thank you. Financial literacy is very important for not only myself, but sorry, I'm still hearing the sound of music.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Let's get that turned off. There we go.
Wonderful, thank you.
Mhm.
Financial literacy as a topic is important to me because of where at least the Hispanic community sits in the total economic world. We're severely and sorely underrepresented um, at various levels, not only um, investments but ownership, new entrepreneurship, and really in we shouldn't be based on where we are in terms of GDP, but we'll get deeper into that. But it's very important to me because of our lack of representation in the economic space.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And when I put this together, I said, we're going to talk about this from both the brown and the black communities. I purposely did not say POC, people of color. I did that really specifically because I personally find that terminology to be way too broad,
Mhm.
right? And we're focusing on Hispanic Heritage Month, which is why we're talking about the brown community. But like I said, we are married and we live in a household where we have both of them here. So today the lens is going to be from the Hispanic community, but we are going to talk a little bit how that impacts the black community as well, because there's some similarities in the way both of our communities approach financial literacy.
Yes, and I want to be direct and say that um, I'll be speaking from the Hispanic lens, uh, quoting numbers that are very specific to the Hispanic community, but doesn't
Mhm,
mean I don't also know some of the numbers as related to the Black community.
mhm,
Um, so I'll do my best to include those numbers as well, but
mhm.
I definitely want to stay in the realm that I know best.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Great.
All right, so then let's get into it. Let's start with our first question here. So, how do you define financial literacy with the lens of the Hispanic community?
Specific to our community, it is the education that is needed and required to get us out of a today's cash mindset and move us towards tomorrow's wealth mindset. The Hispanic community focuses in on today's issues, today's problems, and today's budget management. Doesn't think enough about the long-term wealth creation, not only for yourself in your retirement, but also for your future generations.
Yeah, no, I love what you just said because I think that is something that is part of this community, but I think that can actually be widespread. I think a lot of people, particularly the younger people who might be listening to this today, are
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, I relate to that." Who aren't even a part of the Hispanic or Black community, like that. What cash today and not thinking about the future is just such a prevalent issue. Yeah, definitely. With that said, um, if you had to break down just like some foundational steps to start in a financial literacy journey, what would they be?
Great. So I try to frame this in sequential steps from where it should always begin, and that is at the personal level. So
Mhm,
budgeting is always step one.
mhm,
If we were talking about the overall the overall foundational steps, it would be in this order: budgeting, savings, credit, taxes, insurance, and then finally investing. And investing will have a broad array, but you have to move your way through this level of literacy, education, in order to get to finally investing.
mm. All right. So let's talk about each one of these
Mhm.
steps because when we were preparing for today's conversation, I was just so moved by this. I was like, I'm going to create a graphic for this and everything. So if you're taking notes or if you're not taking notes, I wanted to make sure that I put this up here so that anybody watching it now or anybody watching it later sees these steps. I also, before you get into it, want to make an important note that you said to me as we were talking through this, which is these are not individually right,
Mhm.
like one can't be done, or you can't
Yes.
go into it or jump in at step 4 or whatever. These are sequential. So I just want to make sure I said that before you jumped into it. But if you can kind of dive deeper into each one of these steps for everyone, and why that step is there in that order, I think that would be so helpful.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. All of these are critical to get to the investing step, which is step 6. But each of them has to be addressed, educated, self-educated, or received education, and has to be resolved in order to move to the next piece. Not all of them will be a lengthy process because maybe your taxes are perfect, maybe your credit is perfect, but all of them have to be addressed to some degree. And I think the best sequence is this order. So starting with step 1, budgeting. In all of my conversations with anyone that will listen, the most important building block of financial literacy is they don't have a budget. They don't understand where all their money is going once it gets into their pocket. And this is very, very important in the Hispanic community because of dollar circulation. The amount of money coming in and the amount of money we spend is a considerable portion of the economy. If we spent it more within our own community, we would build our community. If we spent it on the right things, we would bolster the community. And that's why budgeting is so important. You have to know where your money is going and if it's going to the right places.
Can you say more about because so Enrique and I were on we go on a date night every Friday night just so that we can catch up and see what we've missed with each other throughout the week. And the last time we talked about this really specifically, but you said something very interesting during that dinner in terms of the time frame of the dollar within the community. Can you just explain that a little bit further so people understand what you mean by that concept?
Sure. The concept is called dollar circulation, and it's the measure of how a group spends their money, and most importantly, their ability or propensity to spend it within their community. So this is Hispanics buying within the Hispanic community, i.e., strengthening and bolstering their own economy, their own sub-economy, not just spending dollars elsewhere or anywhere, it's spending within. This matters because you can actually trace and measure how long a dollar stays within the community, and this matters. So I'll start with the Black community because unfortunately it's the lower of the numbers. So as soon as an individual makes a dollar, how long until that dollar exits the community, meaning someone uses that dollar in a purchase or service outside of the Black community. In the Black community, it's about 6 hours. So once they've made a dollar.
Stop. Did you say hours?
Hours. Yes.
Okay.
Painful. Painful. Yes.
Really.
And it's going to become more prevalent in just a moment. So it's about 6 hours until someone spends that dollar outside of the community. In the Hispanic community, it's anywhere from 11 to 14 hours, depending on how you measure that. Moving forward, the dynamic completely changes. In the Asian community, for example, it's anywhere from 28 to 30 days. And that, obviously a stark jump in difference. And lastly, in the white community, Caucasian community, it's considered to be indefinite or unlimited because there is constantly a place for them to spend their money within that community. So it really is considered to be almost unlimited. So God, this matters because if we had the intention of bolstering our own individual communities, from my perspective, let's say I got paid this morning, my first purchase would be breakfast, and my last purchase being dinner, and then the dollar would be out of my community.
Yeah, that quick. I mean, as quickly as breakfast. So that hours makes sense. That makes sense. Oh my God, that is so scary, especially when you move from hours to then days to indefinite. Like that is I don't even know. That just blows my mind. I remember if anybody have not watched the April Authentic and Unapologetic conversation, my guest was Irvin Cham, and in that conversation when we were talking about real estate investment, and I think this is like a perfect example of what you just said because it's a bigger issue, but essentially we were debating, Irving and I, about home ownership, and
Mm.
there being like all of these different things around increasing home ownership in the Hispanic community and in the Black community. And the thing about that is, and I think you and I were having this conversation as well, we that's great. That's one measure. But when we're talking about building wealth, the thing about that whole entire process is that almost immediately when you started, what you're saying right now, that money may not ever spend, it may spend 0 minutes in our community when we're talking about things like going out and getting a realtor. It's like, this is why representation matters, right? So going out and getting a realtor, because they're going to get a cut of the process when it's all said and done, right? But you've got everything, your title, your mortgage, your insurance, like everything that goes in the bank, like everything. And if all of those things are white owned, like immediately that dollar is gone. So like
Yes.
even hours become minutes, become zero at
Yes.
that point. That's
Yes.
significant, especially in something like a wealth builder as big as owning property.
Yes. And I did see that webinar as well, and I
Mhm.
agreed with that concept because home ownership is a very strong circulator of the dollar.
Mhm.
Just going into home ownership, as an example, an investment, um, it opens up a lot of pathways to start spending dollars.
Mhm.
Even monthly support of the home, who you do your lawn service with, your cleaning, your insurance, any number of the services that your home will need. Where are your options in terms of spending those dollars?
Mhm.
Very, very
Mhm.
good point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I wanted to bring up one of the comments in the from our listeners. This comes from Takia, and she says, I do feel as though the Hispanic community is better at keeping it in the community than the Black community due to many factors, of course,
Mm-hmm.
like systemic racism impacting the Black community more severely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a significant point to make. But
Mm-hmm.
also at the same time, right before we got on this call, when I asked you why is this important to you, you made a comment about the sense of responsibility for financial literacy in the Hispanic community. Can you talk about that for a second? Because I
Sure.
think it
Uh,
relates.
Absolutely. One of the things that I am very familiar with from the Hispanic community is called that money moment.
Mm,
Um, so you'll be hard pressed to find, and you can ask any Hispanics you may know, when was their money moment, and that
mm,
is very commonly a point in their lives when they had to be the representative for one of their elders. Let's say the parent, an aunt, an uncle, etc.,
mhm,
grandparents as well. Suddenly, we're called to, because we also face the language disparity.
mhm,
We become the translators, so we have to learn a topic and then learn it firstly learn it in English and then translate it to Spanish, just
mhm.
something that is viable for, let's say, our parent to understand, which they didn't know before.
Right.
Um, I have friends and associates who suddenly had to read a tax document at 13 years old because their parent didn't know it.
Mm,
Um, Now, I want to agree with with the commenter, because this money moment, firstly, is impactful in Hispanic person's life, but it is also the catalyst that forces us to have to learn this financial literacy on behalf of our parents. And then with that catalyst being triggered, we start teaching it to each other. So there is a
mm.
little bit of a more of a community component to it once someone in the community has had their money moment.
Yeah, yeah, and I completely agree with that, and I think that's why it definitely feels that way in terms of that the Hispanic community being a little bit better at that. I think that's actually more by force, right? You have no other choice but to do that, but to then act as, okay, it's not just me, probably somebody right next door needs this as well, right? So it just kind of spreads. And I think that there's a balance. I think in the Black community it looks a little bit different because of, again, like the poets, there is just some systemic racism that goes along with it. But I do think that there's something that we don't talk about a lot, which is kind of that whole the idea. And I said this to somebody else talking about this topic, which is saying this, just the generational curse that
Hmm.
we feel that we have in terms of education, money, ownership, all of those things. And she corrected me. She goes, no, it's not generational. it's not a generational curse, it's generational trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that comes out of it. And things like systemic racism and things like that
Mm-hmm.
it's all related to that. So there's a navigation through that as well.
Yes.
And then I do think we actually could be more intentional, I think, in both communities about the way that we spread that through our communities once we have what you just defined as that money moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that understanding each other, very much like we do in our household, and leaning on each other is going to be the only way we can get through this. And it's why like I said, I'm going to speak from the Hispanic community side, but
Yeah.
not um, I stay connected to the same variables and the same statistics on the Black community as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely you have to. You've been in here with me raising our sons, and now we have a grandchild that we're trying to plan a future for.
Yes.
So yeah, it's important. It's why we are always talking, and it just makes for very interesting conversations. I mean, I tell anybody, if you really want to come in, if you're in craving and some of this like intellectual conversation, just pop by for dinner
Yeah.
because our conversations get
Yeah.
really deep almost every night. All right, let's move on to step 2. So step 2, this is saving. So let's talk through that.
Yes, this is pivotal. One of the two big components that I really stress in financial literacy is definitely understanding compounding interest. Compounding interest compounding is the amplifier of value because it introduces the variable of time. So cash today does not equal cash tomorrow. Very, very big problem there. But in order to get the wealth tomorrow, you have to be comfortable with delaying gratification, delaying your spending. And I'll give you a very, very I'm going to call it a simple example, but let me walk through it very, very briefly. Let's say if you put away $100 per month for 35 years, and it was just cash, right? So if we did step 1 and looked at our budget, what could we do without? Once a month, $100, put that money away instead. If you just put a $100 bill away, at the end of 35 years, you'd have $42,000. That's just cash. If you put it in a bank and it earned 5%, at the end of 35 years, you'd have about $113,000. That's 2.5 times more than if you just put away a $100 bill. Why? Because it's earning interest. And then every month it's earning interest on interest, and it's compounding over and over and over and over again. Here's where the example gets fun. That's 5%. Okay. Let's say we earned 10%. Let's say stock market 5%. Let's say it's the best bank interest possible. 10%. Let's say it's the average of what an index earns. 10%. The money doesn't double. Even though I doubled the interest, the money doesn't double. It actually triples. $100 per month at 10% for 35 years is about $380,000. It's firstly 3 times more than just cash, but I'm sorry, 8 times more than just cash, but 3 times more than 5%. So it starts to amplify.
Right.
If we get to firstly start with learning how to save, but then secondly, finally making our way to investing, we can build generational wealth by just a small change in our patterns every month.
Wow. That's so deep. I hope people just took note of what you just said there, because that's really, really deep. And I put up this banner of cash today doesn't equal cash tomorrow, because I think that's really prevalent, right, of what you're saying right now. And as we were talking about this, I wanted to give everybody that just learn to be okay with delayed gratification.
Yeah.
That's a direct quote from Enrique, by the way, because
I use that example. I use that example as a walkthrough because it's just $100 per month. I'm sure we can. Many of us can look at our budget and pick one item that we already spend on and put that away.
Yeah, or a combination of items, you know, or actually, if anybody on here is a fan of Starbucks, which can only occasionally be. But I'm not a fan of Starbucks, not because of the coffee or anything like that. I think it's great. I think it's a great business model and everything like that. But good Lord, the cost of
Mhm.
Starbucks to go there, and people who do it daily, I'm like, how, what you could be doing with that money instead? So, and the primary thing be save it. Yeah, so you're right. I think people can do it, and that's a good argument for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That leads us to the interest rate example leads us to step three,
Yeah.
credit,
Mhm.
specifically because credit, credit cards specifically sap wealth. They are
Mhm.
a complete drain on wealth because of the interest rate.
Mhm.
You're paying to borrow your own money.
Mhm.
And from what I've seen, a 20% interest rate on a credit card is lucky.
Mhm.
The rates have gone up to as much as 35%.
Mhm.
That means you're paying interest three times over, or a third of your future income is going to paying just the interest, not even paying down your debt to a credit card. It's
Mm.
paying down the interest
Interest.
on that debt. So even if you did earn that 10%, you're losing because you're still paying off a credit card. So
Mm.
it's why um, understanding credit, managing that credit, and having it as minimal as possible. I'm not saying live off cash. I'm saying managing it to the best of your ability is definitely a step before we even get to investing.
Mhm. Mhm. And when you say credit, does that also encompass loans?
It does, and that's why I don't say completely removing credit, because there
Right.
are, there are some there are some loans that I would never ask someone to pay off early. A student loan is, for example, um, student loans very commonly are at a really manageable interest rate. Let's say 4%, 5%, something manageable. Uh,
Mhm. Mhm.
if you were to put that if you were to put your monthly due in an account and constantly feed that account so that it is pulled from that account monthly, and you have a successful, never missed, never late stream of payments, that improves your credit score in the future. So
Yeah.
A, you don't have to pay it off early because it has a low rate, and B, constantly, consistently paying that loan down is a very big positive to your credit rating.
Mm.
Your future credit cards, your future mortgage, your future even personal loans, HELOCs,
Mhm.
etc., will
Mm.
be benefited by you keeping that
Keep
student
some.
loan going,
Mm.
and building that credit history. So
Mm.
yes, pay down those monster rate credit cards, but keep that student loan payment going, just to keep building that credit.
You probably blowing some people's minds right now by saying that because everybody wants to get rid of their student loan debt, right? Like that's a big thing. Everyone is like constantly they want to do that. We've had some things that have happened, some legislation that has happened that has helped with wiping some student loan debt as well. But I don't think what people realize of what happens after that is done, and
Yeah.
the impact on your credit, and what happens when you no longer are making payments on that, and all of a sudden you have some consistent, if you were being consistent, some consistent kind
Hmm.
of credit that was happening
Yes.
with that student loan, all of a sudden it's wiped. So like
Mhm.
there is that thing, but you really have to be thinking about what is the impact overall, and then how do you make up for that afterwards? Because let's face it, there's also some horrible loans that are out there.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
All of this depends on a review of like I said, your budget, your savings, and then finally your credit, to think
Mhm.
about where you're spending your money. Do you
Yeah.
have the capacity to save, and where could we save you the credit crunch?
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
or where could you save on paying that interest, trying to get that down? Um,
Right.
it would be great if you had no debts in the world. That would be,
Mhm.
perfect state. But wherever one could continue a loan and keep it successful, i.e., improving your credit score, I
Mhm.
would advise just keep paying it off.
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting, very interesting. All right, so and it's starting to make more sense on why this is in the order that it is and the flow of this of what you need to do in order or have in place before you can address each one of these things. And you said also something really pivotal at the beginning. It doesn't mean that each one of these stages are 6 months, 6 year stages, right? Like it could be some of them you may move through faster than others, just depending on how you're currently managing things.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
The
Okay.
credit conversation could be very quick, or it could be a long process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully, everyone's taxes conversation is quick, meaning we've all kept up with our taxes, we've made the right choices. But it is a step.
It is a
Uh,
step. So let's
none of
talk about it.
yes,
Hmm.
none of us can avoid that annual due of taxes. Um, you would be best off being upfront, paying your taxes, but the important part is being educated on all the deductions you can qualify for,
Hmm.
using them as much as possible, i.e., lowering your tax due as low as possible,
Mm.
such that any excess goes to either your credit, your savings, or as part of your budget. But you have to do that every year and have to be consistent, accurate, and not have problems because that also impacts your credit in the future if you have an outstanding debt, outstanding lien to the government. But this is unavoidable, so I always include it.
What is your advice? And I'll be writing this down because we live together, but I still feel like I learn from you every day. But I would love for you to articulate, wow, what's the best way to do that proactively?
Ah,
Because that's the thing. I think everybody doesn't think about taxes until it's tax time.
mhm.
And then once it's tax time, if you have stuff due, then you're like, where am I supposed to grow that outside? Or like, what is that? What is that? So can you give some advice on that?
Yes. Um, and this is in the I'm going to call it the age of YouTube. Um, the
Wait,
age
say that again. The age.
in the age of YouTube.
Oh, YouTube University. That's what
Yes,
I call it. Yeah.
yes. There is a wealth of knowledge out there, and not just YouTube, but some of the brokerage houses or
Mhm.
even an H&R Block. They do actually keep their staff busy by holding webinars and learning sessions, and even um, having them available to answer questions outside of the tax season. So
Mhm.
you're really talking the last part of May, and then all the way to the end of the year, and then maybe the first couple of weeks of January. They're available. They are doing work elsewhere, but they're
Mhm.
also available for teaching, discussions, questions and answers. Definitely, my advice is to proactively talk about, think about, and learn what firstly, what deductions do I qualify for? How do I get my tax burden down as much as possible? Um,
Mhm.
that's 529s, 401ks, um, uh, gifts to family members, etc., or covering bills. Maybe even talking to a tax advisor on how should I file? Should I file married filing jointly, married filing separately, married but had a household? Just talking through scenarios. They're willing to have these conversations with you because it's their off season.
Mhm. Mhm. And they got the time to do it. So
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes,
So we should definitely take advantage of that.
yes. You make a
Um,
great point that we only think about it right around the beginning of April. Oh my God, the deadline's coming due. We definitely should be thinking about it long term. And no problem if you haven't thought about it yet. You still have a good 4 months this year to think about how to best situate yourself to lower your tax burden.
right, right, right. Okay, that gets us to step five, insurance.
Yes, this is the difficult conversation that I have had with many people because we don't think about the safety net of insurance.
Mm,
If you think about the worst case scenario, someone passing away, uh, those we leave behind are commonly dealing with the burdens we left behind, uh,
mhm,
and not only your self insurance, but let's say insurance for your home, insurance um, for others, and having contingency plans. The insurance conversation is really the foundation of a safety net for anything that you can't solve within your life.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also personal injury insurance in case you suddenly have a medical emergency. So two-sided. It's things that we don't want to think about because obviously it's scary. It reminds us of our own life and mortality, but you don't want to leave those burdens behind to someone else for someone else to solve. Um,
Right.
Having at the very, very least term life insurance is game changing for your family members.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And you know, well, and personally and life, the losses that we've had in the family, and this always becomes the topic of discussion after you get through the initial things that have to be done. Is then what's next? What's where do these things do? Because they don't just disappear, and and most of the time people just don't want to talk about it. Before I even really fully got into human resources, that's now, oh my God, almost 25 years ago. That was at the beginning of, I think, Aflac's journey into being like really marketing themselves. I'm pretty sure that was when the Aflac duck
Mm.
even became a thing, right? The Aflac. And I just remember the struggle at the place that I was working at the time of getting people to understand. I thought it was amazing when they came in and I learned everything about it. Some of that personal injury type of coverage. This was when that was like primarily their thing. And I think the whole thing was, get your insurance if you're hospitalized and we pay you cash, right? Like things like that. But it was really difficult for people to even have the conversation. They were extremely
Yes.
resistant to
Hmm.
that. And I always found that surprising. And when I did venture into my HR career in benefits, one of the things that I found out was both from a life insurance, the number one life insurance that people did not select
Hmm.
was insurance for their spouse. They
Oh,
didn't get spouse insurance.
yes.
And then the second one was not in getting life insurance on their kids.
Mm,
This employer was offering it to employees,
mm,
and get this, for free.
mm.
And people still were not selecting it.
Yes.
That tells you, like, just mentally how much people don't want to think about the loss
Hmm.
of others. And I'm not saying you should have that constantly on your mind, but you should have it on your mind enough to get the coverage, right?
Yes.
It's worth it.
And it's really why it's before investing, because
Mhm.
nothing that you do in terms of setting up what will be your future wealth will
Mhm.
matter unless you have a safety net plan for that wealth. If you
Yeah.
leave it up to the state, they will take an inordinate amount of it. They
Mhm.
ask people about probate court, ask people about when the state comes in and divvies up. I'm sorry, when your state divvies up your estate, ESTATE,
Yes.
they will take the lion's share of it, and what you hoped would go to your family and for kids will be a fraction of what you thought it would be, and that's not fair. That's why
Mhm.
it's important that we have these difficult conversations. What do I want to happen with whatever I have, whether it
Mhm.
be wealth or debts,
Mhm.
after my last days?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, when we were doing this, and someone made this comment, and I'm putting their comment up because this is exactly what I was about to say. Insurance is such a critical part of
Mm-hmm.
legacy planning, and I don't think that it goes back to even what was the step where the delayed gratification was, that step two?
Yep.
Yeah, step two. Yeah, of like that mindset of, why am I buying insurance today for something, I may never see the payoff of that. And it's like, that's a crazy thought
Mm-hmm.
when you're thinking about all of these steps eventually getting you to investing, which is eventually getting you to building wealth, which is wealth that you can't take with you. And
Mm.
it's wealth that the whole point of it is to set up your family, your kids and your grandkids and your grandkids, right? Like that's kind of what we're looking
Yeah.
at. That's why what was that Chris Rock that said, He was like,
In
Shaquille
case.
O'Neal is rich. He
Ah,
was like, the guy that invented the color blue is wealthy, right?
yeah.
Like, there's like a big difference in the concept of how we're thinking about wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that
Makes
gets
sense.
us to step 6, that investing. If we've gotten through these 5 steps and we've addressed each one of these things, then we can start thinking about this part. So walk us through
Yes.
that.
This is the most difficult component of it, and it is why financial literacy matters.
Mhm.
Um, and I looked up the latest numbers on this, and this is from the Pew Research poll that just got completed in March.
Okay.
If you looked at all of the households in the U.S., 61% of them own stock in some form or fashion. So either their retirement accounts or their personal accounts. 61% of all U.S. households.
Okay.
If you cut that to just the Hispanic households, that number drops to 28%.
Mm.
So only less than a third of Hispanic households own some kind of stock in their portfolio.
Okay.
That doesn't even speak to whether they own a home or any form of property. It's just an investment in the stock market. Now, even further, if you remove company-sponsored 401ks, retirement accounts, so somewhere where they had to invest, that number drops to 4.2%. That is 4% of Latino Hispanic households have enough self-confidence in investing that they bought it for themselves.
Hmm.
And that is the difficult part of this conversation, is getting through these 6 steps and making it to investing where we build the confidence to do our own investing and not solely rely on a program sponsored by our companies. You should have a, there should be, you should take advantage of anything offered by the company,
Mhm.
especially if it's matching, but
Mhm.
there should
Mhm.
be an individualized plan as well. And the
Right.
fact that once we did this cut, or once they delved into these numbers, it dropped down to 4% of households
Wow.
are independently investing. It's very, very dramatic. Hard to understand. And
Yeah.
because I said I wouldn't ignore numbers, the 61 of all households drops down to 40% of Black households
Mm.
versus 28% of Hispanic households. So obviously, Black households are doing better um,
Mhm.
in terms of making their own decisions, but
Mhm.
still very, very disparate across, disparate difference to all U.S. households.
Mhm. I have a sneaking suspicion why we're doing just a little bit better. And
Mm.
it's a weird reason.
Okay.
And I think it's because of our inherent distrust. Like we have like a distrust in terms of like we we will question and question and question until it moves us into the direction. But I think that process helps us to do that. So
Uh,
like it's a weird subset of
mm,
like something that's very symptomatic. I feel in the Black community is our distrust in things like banks and things like that. So investing, once we get educated, like we fully dive into that, and then we make that decision. But that our distrust pull it forces us into the research.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a different conversation I was having with somebody else, and it was just something interesting that came out of that. But
Mhm.
I think that's an interesting point. So, okay, so we have gotten to our 6 steps. For anyone listening, this presentation is going to be, it's already recording. You can see the replays on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. On YouTube, it will live forever on our
Mhm.
YouTube page. So I just wanted to say that to everyone in case you missed some things or you want to rewatch this or anything like that. But let's move on. Thank you for those six steps. So here's my next question. And again, we had this conversation, I think, sitting at that dinner,
Mhm.
which is, when should the conversation about financial literacy start in our homes and in our schools? And let's tackle schools, because I think the answer to homes will come out of that.
Okay. Um, in a perfect world, it should be a course in schools, preferably junior high, high school,
Mhm.
right after algebra. So because of the mathematics of financial literacy, I, I,
Mhm.
I really feel like you should tackle algebra first, the concept of an X variable, and
Mhm.
then go into learning about savings, credit, taxes, etc. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and let me know if you want me to delve further into that in terms of the sequencing.
Yeah, I think well, I think more important than that is I think is to talk about what that currently looks like
Ah,
in terms of the education, financial literacy. I myself
mhm.
did not see enough, that not enough in all of my schooling. I don't feel like there is enough, and don't even get me started on like, and you're probably going to talk about this, about like you turn 18, you go out into the world, and the first thing that happens is you're hit with every credit card loan, everything that
Yes.
possibly can happen under the sun. But let's talk about it in our schools at the point that you're talking about, because you're saying algebra, so we're talking about more of that middle school to high
Mhm.
school range, in terms of having this conversation in our homes, our schools, which would make you have to have it in your homes. If your kids came in, it's like, what's compound interest, right? Like, you would need to have that conversation. So talk a little bit more about that. What does it look like?
Yeah. No. Firstly, you make a good point. My my major in college was the actual major is quantitative methods and investments. It was a precursor for financial engineering, so the math behind investments. But I didn't have a formal class on financial literacy, even managing my own taxes and credit in
Mhm.
college. So I was out of school before I actually really looked at, okay, what's going on with these credit cards I have,
Mhm.
or I got a tax bill due coming 415,
Mhm.
and I have no idea where to start.
Mhm.
So the point I'm making is we have a lack of education, even at the formal school level, whether it be junior high and high school. And the initiatives that I've seen are we're trying to get it. There's a lot of legislation trying to get it to be a formal class. Currently, only 21 states in all 50 have a mandate to teach some level of personal finance. It's called personal finance. The problem with that currently is that doesn't require it to be an individual class. It requires it to be a part of an economics
Some other
course.
class. Mhm.
Yes. So if you think about it, so think about the time frame. High school, 4 years. By the end of high school, you're suddenly signing on to a massive amount of educational debt, potentially, if you have to pay for your own school. And
Mhm.
at least within your first 3 days in college, you will have been offered any number of credit cards and a free shirt. So
Mhm.
you're suddenly in that realm of needing that. And then by the end of your first year, so on or about May, you'll have your first tax bill due. Okay. But with no education before that. So only 21 states. We know the amount of resourcing that, 21 states, 4 years, let's call it 2 weeks out of one semester. That's less than 1% of the time in high school preparing you to suddenly be making financial decisions.
Mhm.
We know how much resourcing our schools get, and I don't trust that 2 weeks to be enough to prepare me to suddenly be taking on college loans, accepting credit card offers, and paying my own taxes by myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
We have to get this into the schools somehow and make it
Mhm.
a formal class, a formal personal budgeting, personal finances, whatever, however you want to frame it, such that we
Mhm.
educate our young people on how to handle their lives.
Yeah.
That's very, very critical. Um,
Mhm.
uh, if if we could expand it and make it a formal class, I think the majority of the youth would make better decisions.
Mhm. Definitely. I've said to you many times that I think when you sunset your career and start thinking about retirement, you should absolutely teach,
Mm.
educate in some way. And I still feel like at some point that is in your future. What are your thoughts about how you would go about with doing that education, and particularly, to the audience of Hispanic youth? It even can be Hispanic male youth, whatever it is. But what are your thoughts on that?
Um, so I'm hopeful that most of the families are at least
Mhm.
teaching some kind of money management, whether it be an allowance or paying for chores to be done. So that exists. Uh,
Mhm.
at least it does
Maybe.
in Hispanic in Hispanic households.
Maybe. Yeah.
Pay you to get some work done.
Mhm.
The important variable shift is introducing the concept of having to save.
Mhm.
That's the key critical component because you're putting money away for something in the future,
Mhm.
allowing yourself to not spend it now and get it sometime in the future for more, to have more.
To have
Uh,
more.
introducing that concept of saving, whether you call it tithing or uh, saving for a rainy day, saving for your college, however you need to display it is it just needs to be there.
Mhm.
That is from a family perspective. That is your first step. Teaching your kids that saving matters. Here's the reason why, and what you will have later versus now.
Mhm. Awesome. So that's going to lead us into what I always like to just call take action. I always like in these conversations to leave everybody with one, actionable step that they can take today, no matter where they're at on their financial literacy
Mhm.
journey. So, what is the first thing someone can do to start their journey?
Yeah. You started the last question with, or we focused the last question on, our kids, the youth, etc.
Hmm.
But let's talk about what we could do today, 9/26. Um,
Hmm.
step one is absolutely always your personal budget. Understand all the income that's coming in versus the money that's going out. Where
Hmm.
are you spending that money, and is it being spent in the best way possible?
Hmm. Hmm.
That
Yeah. So,
you can't do that
it's,
until you have it laid out, right to the penny.
yeah.
I know I spent this on Starbucks, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I remember this is related, but not really related. There was a campaign that we were trying to do at one of the organizations that I worked at, and it was at that time. Again, this is going to date me. It was for United Way, but it was a United Way campaign, and we were trying to get people to make just small donation to that.
Mhm.
And one of the things, and I can't remember exactly, I think it was called something like Minutes Matter or something like that. But basically, we came up with this campaign where you can just donate like your time, and it forced everyone to kind of do the math of what their hourly salary looked like by the minute, and just doing some calculation around that, and say, I will donate 5 minutes a
Mhm.
day, and then we basically would spit out what that
Wow.
looked like, right? It was just such an interesting thing, because what ended up happening after that campaign is people had that on their minds, and they started thinking about that for their retirement savings plans
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
So it just turned into, and we literally had people asking, "Hey, can y'all do that for that?" So I,
Mhm.
like, in my head, can calculate that better, because the campaign also did say, if your minutes equaled, then the $7, that's you kicking your smoking habit. Again, I'm
Mhm.
dating myself back to times you could just smoke everywhere, right?
Mhm.
Like things like that, or a pack of soda or something like that. And it's just that, it's thinking of your finances in a way that's super real to you, in terms of how you can impact them in your budget, like,
Yes.
realistically.
Yes. And very similar story. At the orientation in college, one of the comments that was made was, this school does not take attendance. So you have this many classes, this many
Right.
every day. You
Hmm.
attend or you don't attend.
Yeah, it's on
The
you.
reason they say that is because it allowed us to go right into the math.
Hmm.
What the teacher did at the time was said, okay, here's how much each semester costs.
Hmm.
Here's how many times you will be in class. Let's say 20 hours over the entire semester.
Hmm.
Every class you skip, you are still paying the loan for that
Hmm.
hour. And it made it so real
Right. And
Why
this is
would
what
I?
at our cost.
Yes. Why would I skip a class when I just paid? I still have a loan
Hmm.
that represents $5,000 for that 1 hour I skipped.
Yeah.
Just throwing out a number. Then translate that to the other side of a budget.
Hmm.
How many hours do I have to work to satisfy my Starbucks habit, or
Right.
to pay for whatever I chose to spend my money on? When I
Yeah.
when I when I allocate those hours to, let's say, my mortgage, it matters to me.
Yeah.
When I allocate those hours to something that doesn't give me a long-term fulfillment,
Hmm.
it's less impactful.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
No, for
budget
sure.
budget is step one.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I'm going to open us up to Q&A. Before I
Okay.
do, I have to do my Leader Keys commercial. So we help with these topics, and our point is to really ensure that we bring things to organizations as well for each one of these topics. So I wanted to just kind of put in where we step in terms
Mhm.
of how we help organizations identify ways to help their employees, particularly for financial literacy. So we basically partner, we identify, align, develop, measure, and report. So we basically help you. Where are your gaps? What are your existing offerings? What solutions can we come up with? And we help you do that, and to help you come up with some execution plans. Then
Mhm.
we'll help you with the measurement of that, and then the reporting, so you have some insights to continuously improve.
Mhm.
So I just want to kind of throw that in there, but then open it up for our Q&A. So feel free to put any questions that you have into the comments. I think I'm seeing most of them
Mhm.
come through. I do actually have a comment that I want to put up here
Yes.
from Pamela.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's a good one. She says people should buy whole life insurance while young because they are much cheaper and it has no end date as long as you pay. It also builds cash value. So speak to that,
100%.
because that's a great comment.
I caught that one as well. Thank
Mhm,
you, Tamala. Very important comment, because these are the conversations that we should be having.
mhm,
I mentioned term life because more often than not, I'm talking to an adult, and there are variables that differentiate whole life and term life in terms of how much you pay into that insurance and how much coverage you get. Whole life is the entirety of your life, so it's cheaper when you buy it early on. Term
mhm,
life, uh, term life, I don't believe can go past 30 years, but
mhm,
because you have set a quote unquote time variable to it, you can manage the amount of coverage and the amount of insurance you pay into it. But
mhm,
both topics are very important, and I'm really glad that she mentioned it, because knowing that both exist is definitely step one. There
mhm.
are an immense amount of categories that you can play with in terms of your insurance package, but just knowing that a term life insurance package exists versus a whole life insurance package exists for
Mhm.
every family should matter, because the adults should have a insurance versus the children having a different type of insurance.
Oh,
Really appreciate that you put that in there.
yeah, yeah. Thank you, Tamala, for that.
Yeah.
And any other questions? Because we're coming up with about 3 minutes left over. And if you have questions, again, this replay will be available on Facebook, Instagram, sorry, not Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also put questions into the comments and the conversations
Mm.
in all three of those areas as well.
Mhm.
And I will be sure to get those answered by Enrique, because this is his expertise. And as you guys see, there's so much. It's sometimes hard to know we're going to go in, have 60 minutes, and decide what things are going to go in that 60 minutes that we what value do we want to bring. And it always surprises me how quick we get to that point.
Yeah.
So I want to first again thank you so much, Enrique, for coming and doing this. I really appreciate you coming
Mm.
in, having this authentic and unapologetic conversation with me, and just really sharing your expertise with everybody here. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed your time here as well.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me. I really
Good.
appreciate it.
Good. So, as I had already seen, because I'm doing a terrible job of producing today, um, Thank you all for attending. We are booking 2025 for our authentic and unapologetic conversations. If you have a topic that you'd like to come and chat with me, let me know. You can come in. At the bottom of every single page, I actually put the link to it. Let's let that go away so you can see that. But you can always book an appointment with me through my Calendly. There's one that's very specific. If you go to calendly.com/LeaderKeys, you will see all of the choices. You want to choose the one that says authentic and unapologetic conversations planning. And then we can get together and we can talk about what you want to talk about and bring out to the universe, to everyone. Again, thank you so much, Enrique. Thank you, everybody who attended today. We will continue the conversations in each one of the chats in each place. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you very much.